A man doesn't betray you first with his body, he betrays you with his energy. Let that one land heavy, my friends, because what we call cheating is often just the final scene of a movie that started long ago, quietly, subtly, and right under your intuition's nose. And too many women wait until it's loud, until the texts are undeniable, until the lie slips, until the body goes where the soul already left. But betrayal rarely begins between the sheets. It begins in the shift, the long pause after your question, the eye contact that's no longer there. The conversations that start to feel like paperwork, the way his hand still touches yours, but there's no gravity behind it. You think, am I imagining this? No, my love, you're not imagining anything. You're feeling the leak in the connection. You're sensing the moment the relationship stopped being a bond and started becoming a performance. And if you've been there or you're sensing it now, this message is yours. So before we go any deeper, take a second and hit that like button, smash subscribe, and share this with someone who might be sitting in silence right now, second guessing her instincts. Not for me. Do it for you. For the woman who's done ignoring her own emotional radar just to keep the peace. Because peace built on self-abandonment isn't peace. It's pressure dressed up pretty. Hey ladies, imagine this. You're in a room filled with candles, soft light, calm music, everything seems perfect. But one candle, just one, is flickering too fast. Its flame is unsteady. At first you think it's just a draft, a small thing. But the longer you watch it, the more you notice it's not reacting to the room. It's reacting to something within the candle itself. That's how betrayal begins. It's not always an outside force. It's a flicker from within, a flicker you feel before you ever see it. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Let's not call dysfunction fate. Let's stop treating disconnection like it's just a phase. Let's pull the signs out of your blind spot and hold them in the light. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you own what you feel, you stop waiting for proof and start trusting your presence. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're tuned in. You're emotionally intelligent, spiritually awake, and done watering dead plants just because you once believed in the garden. You deserve love with eyes open, not blind hope. And if no one else will say it, I'll say it for you. You already know when something's off. You already know when he's present and when he's pretending. You know the difference between distance and depth, and the longer you ignore that knowing, the more disconnected from yourself you become. So stay with me, my friends. Stay with me, because what we're about to walk through isn't about paranoia, it's about precision. This is about recognizing the 6 screaming signs that he's not just slipping from you, but slipping from himself. And once you see them clearly, you'll stop waiting for the betrayal and start protecting your peace. Let's begin. Number 1, his attention becomes currency, not connection. If you have to earn his attention, you're already losing his respect. Let that sit with you, my friends, because attention is not affection. It's not connection. It's not intimacy. In its healthy form, attention is a byproduct of presence. It flows naturally from someone who's with you, not just next to you. But when his attention becomes something you have to earn, that's not love anymore. That's a transaction, and it's one-sided. At first, it might feel subtle. He's slower to text, slower to call. He used to notice the small things, your mood, your tone, the little ways your day shaped your energy. Now, you're repeating yourself. You're checking if he heard you. You're wondering if maybe you're just being needy. You're not needy. You're noticing. And what you're noticing is this. You've gone from being the center of emotional gravity to circling his orbit like a satellite, hoping to catch a signal. Let me give you a picture. Imagine being in a restaurant with someone you love. You're talking, laughing, but suddenly his phone rings. And from that moment on, he's not there anymore. He's nodding, he's making eye contact, but his spirit, it left the table 5 minutes ago, and you start to lean in harder, laugh louder, try more. Why? because you feel the drop and you're trying to make up for his absence with your energy. But let me ask you something and answer it honestly. When did you start auditioning in a relationship you already earned? Because when his attention becomes conditional and your energy shifts just to re-attract it, that's not connection. That's survival mode. That's your nervous system detecting the shift before your mind catches up. Carl Jung would call this projection. He begins to emotionally withdraw, not because you've changed, but because he has. But instead of owning the disconnect inside himself, he subtly turns the spotlight back on you. He makes it seem like you're off, you're doing too much, you're different. But here's the truth. A man doesn't cheat when someone better shows up. He cheats when he starts undervaluing what he has, when he takes your consistency for granted, when he mistakes your softness for servitude. He stops showing up fully, and now suddenly you're the one trying to keep things together. You're texting more, planning more, reaching harder, but you're not connecting. You're chasing, and every time you chase, you give him the silent permission to do less. Let me be clear. Love is not a performance. You're not on a stage auditioning for someone who already said they were yours. You should not have to work to keep what's meant to be nurtured, not negotiated. If the connection starts feeling like a competition, guess what? You've already lost something deeper than loyalty. You've lost mutuality. And without mutual energy, love turns into labor. And labor without appreciation, that's emotional poverty. So the next time you catch yourself wondering why you feel like you're doing all the emotional heavy lifting, take a pause. Not to make a move, but to take inventory. Because sometimes the relationship is still technically together. But his loyalty, his presence, his effort, already on clearance. And let me tell you, discounted loyalty isn't worth full price heartbreaking. You don't have to perform for attention. You were never meant to beg for what you naturally attract when you're fully in your power. Stay with me, my friends, because what we're walking into next, it's the shift that's even harder to catch. The one where he stops caring about your mind, not just your heart. The curiosity fades and something dangerous replaces it. Let's go there next. Number 2. He stops being curious about your world. The moment he stops asking questions is the moment he starts checking out. Let's sit with that one for a moment, my friends. Because curiosity isn't just small talk. Curiosity is emotional engagement. It's the language of someone who's still invested. A man who's truly present doesn't just hear your words, he feels your silences. He doesn't need a reason to care. He cares because you matter. So when the questions stop, when he no longer wonders how your day went, what made you light up at work, or why your voice sounds just a little more tired than usual, that's not comfort. That's not him just being chill. That's not settling into routine. That's emotional vacancy. That's a man emotionally moving his furniture out while his body still occupies the room. At first, you might not notice it. It's subtle. He used to ask about that project you were nervous about. Now he just says, cool. He used to ask why you were quiet. Now he uses your quiet as an excuse to put his headphones in. He used to lean in. Now he leans away. It doesn't come with an announcement. It comes with absence. An absence that slowly starts replacing connection with obligation. And here's what happens to so many women when this shift begins. They compensate. They fill in the silence. They talk more, ask more, initiate more. They tell themselves, he's tired, he's stressed. Maybe I just need to give him space. But let's call it what it is. He's not too tired. He's too distant. Because here's the truth. A man who is loyal doesn't just stay faithful in body. He stays invested in spirit. And part of that investment means he keeps wanting to know you. Not the version of you he's memorized, but the version of you that's evolving every day. Carl Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. And a man who stopped being curious about your heart, he stopped choosing you, even if he still says all the right things. Now, let me tell you something else that's hard to hear. Where emotional curiosity dies, emotional replacements begin. Not because she's smarter, not because she's prettier, but because she's new. And for men who never learned how to build depth, novelty becomes a substitute for connection. She's not better, she's just less known. And mystery is easier than intimacy for someone who doesn't want to face himself. So when he stops being curious about your world, that's not peace, that's erosion. And the real danger isn't that he'll cheat tomorrow. The danger is that you'll stay so long trying to bring him back, you forget how to bring yourself forward. You deserve more than someone who used to ask, used to care, used to see you. Love doesn't used to, love evolves with you. It learns your new chapters, it asks better questions. So don't ignore this silent scream, because by the time he stops wondering about your life, he may already be rehearsing his exit in his mind. And coming up next, we're diving into the pattern so many confuse with passion, but is really just emotional manipulation in disguise. The game where he keeps you guessing and calls it chemistry. Stay with me, it's about to get real. Number 3, he keeps you guessing, not grounded. Confusion is not chemistry, it's manipulation dressed in mystery. Let that hit where it needs to hit, my friends, because somewhere along the way, you were taught that if a man keeps you on your toes, if he's hot one day, cold the next, deep one moment and dismissive the next, it must mean there's passion, spark, magic. Let's kill that myth right now. If your heart feels like it's on a roller coaster every time your phone buzzes, if you go from butterflies to anxiety depending on the length of his reply, that's not love, that's emotional instability. And instability is where betrayal brews, quietly, slowly, but with certainty. This man isn't complex, he's disorganized, and he's not mysterious, he's unclear, he's not passionate, he's patterned, and not in a good way. One day he texts you like you're the only woman he sees. The next day, radio silence. He tells you how beautiful you are, then undercuts it with a joke that makes your stomach twist. He says he's not like other guys, that he just needs time, but somehow you're always left wondering where you stand. Let me say this loud and clear for the ones in the back. If you constantly have to guess, it's not because you're insecure, it's because he's inconsistent. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And this right here, this is a classic escape tactic. Some men create confusion not because they're unaware, but because clarity would require them to show up. And showing up demands presence, commitment, and maturity, not just intentions, but actions. So what does he do instead? He keeps things vague. He drops just enough emotional breadcrumbs to keep you following, but never enough to feed the bond. He uses tension and uncertainty as a tool, because if you're busy decoding him, you're too distracted to see the truth. He's not really building anything with you. He's just maintaining access. And access without direction, that's how women get trapped in almost relationships that go nowhere for months, sometimes years, hoping, wishing, waiting for clarity that he's never planning to give. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself, if you feel like you need to study his patterns just to feel secure, that's not connection. That's emotional sabotage. And I'll say this with love and fire, the woman who stays too long in confusion becomes blind to betrayal when it shows up in broad daylight, not because she's foolish, but because she's exhausted. And when your nervous system is always in wait-and-see mode, you stop trusting your instincts. So don't wait for confirmation that he's wasting your time. Your clarity is more important than his potential. Your peace is more sacred than his mixed signals. And your emotional safety is not up for negotiation. Stay with me, my friends, because what's coming next is a tactic just as subtle, but just as dangerous. The moment he stops respecting your intuition and starts calling it drama, that's when it gets real. Let's go. Number 4, he dismisses your intuition because he's afraid of what you'll uncover. Gaslighting doesn't just blur the truth, it prepares the stage for betrayal. Let that hit, my friends, because what we're talking about now, this is where the slow drip of dishonesty turns into a full flood of disconnection. And it almost always starts the same way. You feel something. Something off, something misaligned, something that doesn't sit right. So you speak up. You say, "Hey, something's shifted." You feel distant. He shrugs. You say, "Why did your tone change when I asked about her?" He scoffs. You ask, "Why do I feel like I'm the only one holding this together?" And he smiles condescendingly and says, "You're overthinking." But here's what you need to understand. You're not overthinking, you're overfeeling. And that is not a flaw, that is a gift. Women are intuitive by nature. You feel things before they show up in words. You pick up on tone, on timing, on subtle breaks in energy. You notice when the warmth in his voice becomes calculation, when his attention turns into performance, when his presence starts feeling transactional. But when a man is starting to slip, emotionally or physically, your intuition becomes his greatest threat. So what does he do? He tries to dismantle your radar before it catches the signal. He makes you doubt yourself, question your sanity, reframe your sensitivity as a liability instead of a superpower. Because if he can make you stop trusting your own perception, he doesn't have to be accountable to what he's no longer hiding well. And let's be clear, he knows something's off. But Carl Jung would say, this is the repression of the shadow, the guilt, the duplicity, the distance. He doesn't want to face it, so he pushes it back onto you. He blames your tone, your timing, your trust issues. Let me say this plainly. Any man who mocks your intuition is already slipping out the back door of integrity. Because a loyal man might feel uncomfortable, but he doesn't disrespect your internal compass. He might not agree, he might even get defensive, but he never makes you feel crazy for noticing what's real. So the moment you start twisting yourself into silence just to avoid being labeled too much, that's the moment betrayal starts gaining ground. Quietly, privately, and it always starts with emotional dishonesty, not yours, his. Don't question your gut, question why he needs you to, because truth doesn't fear inspection, but betrayal fears your awareness. Stay with me, my friends, because next we're stepping into a tactic so subtle it gets called harmless. But it's the beginning of emotional erosion. The game of comparison, when he puts you next to someone else, not to praise you, but to see how much of yourself you'll shrink just to stay. Let's go deeper. Number 5, he puts you in emotional competition. A man who is loyal doesn't entertain attention, he protects connection. Say that again out loud, my friends, because if a man is truly in it with you, you feel safe, seen, chosen. Loyalty doesn't flirt with distraction. It defends what it values. But when betrayal starts creeping in, it doesn't always show up loud and obvious. Sometimes it walks in wearing a smile and pretending to be casual. Watch this closely. Suddenly he's just a little too playful with that female coworker, not inappropriate, just suggestive. He casually drops how cool or mature his ex has become, like he's reminiscing. He scrolls Instagram, pausing a little too long on certain photos, even with you sitting right there. You bring it up and he says, "What? It's not a big deal. You're overreacting." But you're not. These aren't accidents. These are micro tests, subtle invitations to see just how far he can push before you draw a line. It's not about the woman on the screen, it's about your reaction, your threshold, the emotional rope he's quietly tugging to see how much slack you'll give. This is not harmless curiosity. This is calculated disrespect. Carl Jung said, "The shadow is not evil by nature. It simply wishes to be known." And this right here, this is a man flirting with his shadow. He's not fully cheating, but he's fantasizing about the freedom of disloyalty without paying the price. He wants the ego stroke from other women while still cashing in on your emotional labor. He wants both. But you weren't built to be an option. You were built to be a partner. And when you ignore these moments, when you brush it off as insecurity or worse, start comparing yourself, you're not just tolerating his behavior, you're training him. You're teaching him what you'll excuse tomorrow. And the truth is, you can't be in competition with someone who isn't even in the relationship. You shouldn't have to compete for respect. Respect is the minimum, not a prize you win by staying silent. So the next time he brings another woman into your emotional space, whether through words, glances, or games, don't just feel uncomfortable. Feel called. Called to either be honored fully or to walk away powerfully. Because you're not a placeholder. You're a damn presence. And if he can't see it, someone else will. Coming up next, we're exposing the final sign, the one most women feel last, but it hits the hardest, when you start to feel invisible, even while giving him everything. Stay with me. Number 6, he begins to emotionally exit before he physically cheats. Most men cheat emotionally before they ever cross a physical line. And that's the line no one talks about enough, my friends, because the betrayal doesn't begin in the bedroom. It begins in the disconnect, in the sigh he no longer explains, in the smile that doesn't reach his eyes, in the way he hugs you, but his energy's already halfway down the street. He's still there, but he's not with you, and you feel it. Don't pretend you don't. Your body knows before your brain is ready to admit it. The late-night silence feels louder. The space between conversations starts to feel like a canyon. You begin wondering, was it something I said, something I didn't say? But this isn't about what you're doing wrong. It's about what he stopped doing entirely. He stops asking how your day went. He stops making plans for next week, next month, next anything. He stops being inspired by your presence and starts being indifferent to it. Carl Jung called this disintegration of the self, that slow internal unraveling when a person no longer sees their reflection in the relationship. So instead of looking inward, they start searching elsewhere, not for a better partner, but for a better reflection of themselves. Because in truth, he hasn't fallen out of love with you. He's fallen out of alignment with his own integrity. And he can't face that. And so what does he do? He seeks energy outside of what he once valued. A glance, a laugh, a message. It starts small, but to him, it feels new, fresh, free. He thinks, I feel alive again. But what he doesn't realize is that this isn't aliveness. It's just escape, a shortcut, an illusion that someone new will fix what he never had the courage to fix within. You didn't fail him. You didn't stop being beautiful. You didn't become boring. He stopped honoring the connection. And let's be clear, when he finds even a shallow imitation of intimacy elsewhere, he mistakes it for depth, not because it's deep, but because he's gotten used to coasting with you. He's confused novelty for meaning. And the moment a man starts seeking that outside the relationship, betrayal isn't a maybe, it's a matter of when. But here's your power. If you catch this shift early, not with panic, but with presence, you can stop mourning what was and start reclaiming what you are. You can stop negotiating your worth against his avoidance. You can see it for what it is, a slow exit dressed as distance. And you can decide that your soul doesn't do silent departures. You don't chase ghosts, you honor truth. And the truth is, sometimes the relationship ends long before the goodbye, but you get to choose when your dignity begins. Coming up next, the real close, not about him, but about you. The final reminder that you were never the mistake, you were the mirror. And some men, they're not afraid of losing you. They're afraid of what they see when you're gone. Number 7, the way you feel around him starts to diminish you. A woman's energy doesn't lie, she just learns how to ignore it. And that right there, my friends, is where so many heartbreaks begin, not in the betrayal itself, but in the moment you start shrinking around the man you once felt safe with. At first you were radiant, you laughed freely, spoke boldly, walked into the room like your presence had weight. Now you hesitate, now you rehearse your words before you speak, and now you monitor your tone, your outfits, your reactions, not for harmony, but to avoid setting him off. That's not love, that's emotional erosion. You didn't change because you evolved. You changed because you adapted to tension. You dulled your shine to survive the storm. And every time you silence your truth to preserve his comfort, you lose another piece of your peace. Let me say this clearly. When you're in a relationship where you can't relax, where your nervous system is constantly on edge, bracing for his next mood swing or retreat, that's not a connection. That's a cage. It doesn't always start loud. Sometimes it starts with your laughter fading, your joy shrinking, your mirror reflecting someone who doesn't quite look like you anymore. You used to love the way you looked. Now you question if you're doing too much. You used to feel bold. Now you apologize for simply having needs. And the heartbreaking part, you start to believe maybe it's you. But hear me, cheating doesn't always happen because someone else was better. It often happens after you've been so emotionally diminished, so repeatedly dismissed, that you forget what it feels like to be fully seen. Carl Jung would say that the self slowly dissolves under repression, and what you're repressing here is your truth, your voice, your intuition, your entire spirit. So ask yourself, do I still recognize the woman who said yes to this love? Because that version of you, the one who loved boldly, laughed deeply, trusted her worth, she's still in there. She hasn't left. She's just waiting for you to choose her again. And that, my friends, is exactly what we're closing with next. The awakening, the reclamation. Not about saving the relationship, but about saving yourself from a love that made you small. Let's finish this strong. Number 8, he feels entitled to your love, but no longer earns it. Loyalty isn't love, it's discipline, it's maturity, it's choice. And when a man stops making that choice daily, don't be surprised when the love starts to rot silently under the surface. My friends, this is the most dangerous stage, not when he pulls away in some dramatic fashion, but when he settles into entitlement, when he thinks your love is guaranteed, when he stops earning what he still expects. He doesn't check in anymore, doesn't say thank you for the little things, doesn't celebrate your efforts, your sacrifices, your emotional consistency. Why? Because in his mind, your love has become his default setting, something he can count on without contribution, something he can consume without refilling. He wants your softness, your loyalty, your care, but he's stopped doing the work that made you give it freely in the first place. He assumes it's on auto-renew. And that right there is the breeding ground for betrayal, not because he wants someone else more, but because he stopped seeing you clearly. And when a man stops seeing the weight of your presence, he starts wandering for what he thinks is missing. Carl Jung said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power." But when a man starts exerting emotional control, when he believes he can put in 50% and still get 100% of you, that's not love anymore. That's power play, quiet dominance over your emotional labor. You're doing the emotional check-ins. You're maintaining the connection. You're feeding the intimacy. And he's just receiving. He wants the loyalty of a queen while showing up with the consistency of a court jester. Let me be clear, you are not here to water a plant he refuses to tend. Love is not a vending machine. It's not a one-time transaction. It's a living thing, and it will die if one person stops showing up for it. So now you have a choice. You can remind him. You can reestablish the standard. You can say, hey, love doesn't live in assumption. It breathes in appreciation. Or you can choose yourself. You can step away from a connection that no longer reflects the energy you give. You can stop pouring into a cup with holes in it and finally start pouring that love back into you. Either way, hear this and hear it with fire. You are not obligated to stay loyal to a man who no longer honors the relationship he once begged to build. And if he treats your consistency as entitlement, that's not your signal to give more. It's your wake-up call to give it to yourself. Because the love you're giving away so freely deserves to be met with reverence, reciprocity, and real presence. So now we close, not with begging, not with hoping, but with the deepest power move of all, returning to your worth. Let's finish this. So here's the truth, my friends. If you felt even one of these signs in your gut, don't brush it off. Don't wait for proof to honor your own knowing. Cheating doesn't begin with the body. It begins with the slow betrayal of presence, of effort, of respect. And you deserve more than someone who stays out of convenience. You deserve someone who chooses you fully, daily, and consciously. If this spoke to you like this video, subscribe for more truth-telling content and share it with a woman who needs this reminder, because awareness isn't fear, it's freedom. Stay strong, stay wise, stay with me.